My parents gave my sister everything. And on the night she needed someone to save her company from collapsing, they finally understood what they had thrown away. I was standing near the back of the conference room when it happened. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Toronto, the CN Tower lit up against a November sky. My father was across the room, older than I remembered, his hair gone mostly grey. He was scanning the crowd the way people do when they're looking for someone they're not sure they'll recognize. Then his eyes landed on me. He didn't smile, he just stared, like a man trying to solve an equation that shouldn't exist. My name is Jordan, and for most of my life, I was the one my family forgot to invest in. It wasn't dramatic. That's the thing no one tells you about being the overlooked child. It rarely is. There's no single moment where someone sits you down and says, "Your sister matters more than you do." It happens in small doses, a skipped conversation, a tuition check that arrives for her and not for you, a birthday where the cake is smaller and the speeches are shorter, and your father spends most of dinner on his phone. My sister, she was 2 years younger than me, and she had always been the one my parents pointed to when they wanted to feel good about themselves. She was sharper, funnier in rooms full of people, better at making my mother laugh. I understood that, in an abstract way, the way you understand weather. You don't argue with it, you just get dressed accordingly. The pattern started early. When I was 15 and needed a new laptop for school, my father told me to save up from my part-time job at the grocery store on Bloor Street. 2 months later, my sister mentioned offhand that her old laptop was slow, and a brand new MacBook appeared on the kitchen table before the week was out. No conversation about earning it, no lecture about independence. Just a MacBook sitting there in its box like it was nothing. I didn't say anything. I went back to bagging groceries. By the time I was applying to universities, my parents already begun planning my sister's future. She was going into business. They decided together over dinner one night, while I was still waiting to hear back from engineering programs. They discussed which schools had the best placement rates, whether she should look at Western or Rotman at U of T, whether living on campus or commuting from Mississauga made more financial sense. I sat 3 seats away at the same table, holding a brochure from Waterloo that no one asked to look at. I got in. I didn't tell them for 2 days. When I finally mentioned it, my father glanced up from his coffee and said, "That's good." Then he asked my sister if she'd heard back from Western yet. I paid for Waterloo myself. Student loans, a part-time job at a campus cafe, a scholarship I won in second year that covered a semester's tuition. My parents didn't ask how I managed. I think they assumed someone was helping me, or maybe they just didn't think about it. People rarely examine the assumptions that are convenient for them. My sister, meanwhile, had her tuition covered. Her rent in a Kensington Market apartment paid, a car for her second year. When I visited home during reading week, I heard my parents talking about setting up a small investment account for her, seed money for when she graduated and wanted to start something of her own. So I was in the kitchen making toast. No one lowered their voice. The painful part was never the money itself. Money is just money. The painful part was understanding what the money represented, that they had looked at both of us and quietly decided who was worth the investment. And I was the one they had written off. Not cruelly, not with malice, just with a kind of comfortable indifference, the way you stop watering a plant you've already decided won't grow. I went back to Waterloo and I made a decision. Not an angry one. I wasn't angry, exactly. I was clear. I stopped waiting for them to change their minds. I stopped sending updates about my grades or my internships or the awards I picked up along the way. I let the distance between us become geographical, and then emotional, and then something closer to permanent. After graduation, I took a job with a mid-sized civil engineering firm in Calgary. Then I moved into project finance, which surprised even me. I discovered I was good at reading the structural risk in large infrastructure deals, the kind of thing that takes years to develop an eye for. I built a reputation slowly, the way you build anything real, by showing up and doing the work and letting the results speak longer than any conversation could. I kept my professional life off social media. No LinkedIn updates, no Instagram posts from job sites. My parents knew I was in Calgary, that I was in engineering, nothing more. Relatives occasionally passed along fragments. They heard I was doing well. They heard I'd moved firms. They heard something about a promotion. I let those fragments float without confirming or denying any of them. Silence was the only advantage I had, and I was careful with it. Back in Toronto, my sister had started a company, event planning and corporate hospitality, which suited her. She was charming and organized and genuinely good at reading what clients wanted before they knew how to ask for it. My parents were involved in ways that went beyond encouragement. My father co-signed a business loan. My mother helped furnish the office space in Liberty Village. Family dinners became strategy sessions. Relatives forwarded her name to people they knew. The whole machinery of family support that had never once operated on my behalf ran smoothly and efficiently for her, and I watched it from a distance without much feeling. I wished her well, honestly. Whatever had happened between me and my parents had nothing to do with her. She hadn't asked for the favouritism any more than I had asked to go without it. 5 years after I left Toronto, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. My sister was getting married to someone she'd met through work, a contractor who ran a mid-sized construction project management outfit. The wedding was set for late November at the Fairmont Royal York, which I recognised as a significant expense. A printed insert mentioned that the reception would include a corporate partnership announcement. Her company was merging its event management services with a hospitality group, a business milestone she'd turned into a celebration. I almost threw the invitation away. Then something made me keep it. The reason I kept it was a name on the envelope. The hospitality group named in the insert was Lakeshore Integrated Services, which was the operating name of a company I had spent the past 14 months helping restructure. Let me explain. 3 years before the wedding, my firm was brought in to assess the financial viability of a portfolio of mid-market hospitality and events businesses across southern Ontario. The portfolio was struggling, over-leveraged, badly coordinated, losing contracts to leaner competitors. I led the restructuring team. Over 18 months, we consolidated operations, renegotiated supplier contracts, and brought in new capital partners. By the time we finished, I held a significant equity position in the reorganized company. I had joined the board the previous spring. My sister's company had been in early-stage acquisition talks with Lakeshore for months before the wedding. The deal had stalled twice over contract terms. I had been part of the team reviewing the acquisition from Lakeshore's side, and I had flagged 2 provisions in the draft agreement that needed amendment before we could proceed. No one on my sister's side knew who I was. I was just an initial on a document, a name in a restructuring summary that had circulated through her lawyer's office without context. The night before the wedding, I learned that the deal had nearly collapsed entirely. A disagreement over a revenue-sharing clause had pushed both sides to the edge of walking away. The event partnership my sister had planned to announce at her own reception was in jeopardy. Her lawyer had sent a revision at midnight. Our legal team had responded by 7 in the morning with a counteroffer. I had approved the final terms at 9:15, 2 hours before the ceremony began. I went to the wedding. I sat near the back. I wore a dark suit and I kept to myself. The reception was in the Fairmont's main ballroom, high ceilings and warm light, and the particular kind of organized elegance that my sister had always been good at pulling together. I recognized some relatives I hadn't seen in years. I watched my parents from across the room. My mother looked the same, a little softer maybe. My father looked smaller than I remembered, the way people do when you stop building them up in your memory. It was my sister's new husband who connected the pieces first. He was talking to his own business partner near the bar when something came up about the Lakeshore deal. He'd been following it closely since it affected his wife's company. His partner mentioned the name of the individual who had approved the final revision that morning. My sister's husband went still. He looked across the room at the place card someone had shown him earlier, cross-referencing the name. Then he looked at me. He walked over slowly, like a man who was working out whether he was about to make an embarrassing mistake. "Jordan?" he said. I said yes. He said, "You're the one who cleared the contract this morning." I said I was. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My wife doesn't know." I told him I was aware of that. He excused himself and I watched him cross the room to my sister. I watched her expression change as he spoke quietly into her ear. She looked up. She found me in the crowd. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she walked over, and the room shifted slightly around her as she crossed it, the way room do when someone is moving with real intent. She stopped in front of me and said, "I didn't know it was you." I told her I hadn't made it easy to find out. She said, "The deal nearly fell through last night." I said I knew. "You approved the revision?" I said yes. She looked at me the way people look at someone they realize they've been misreading for a long time. Not guilty, exactly. More like recalibrating. "Why didn't you say something?" I thought about that for a second. I told her the truth. Because it wasn't about her. The work was the work. Whether she knew my name attached to it was never the point. My parents had made their way across the room by then, drawn by the intensity of the conversation or the unusual stillness at the center of it. My mother reached us first. She looked at me like I was someone she recognized from an old photograph, a face she couldn't quite place in the present tense. "Jordan," she said. "Just my name. Nothing after it." My father stood a step behind her. In 20 years of learning to read his reactions, I had never seen him look the way he looked at that moment. Not ashamed, not angry, something quieter than both of those. like a man who has just been shown a very long accounting of something he thought he'd already settled. My sister's new mother-in-law, who had heard pieces of the conversation, leaned toward a relative and said something. The words spread through the room in that efficient, invisible way that information moves at family gatherings. Within minutes, people were looking at me differently. Some of them were remembering, I could tell. Remembering the years of polite nods, the missing phone calls, the family photos where someone was always slightly out of frame. Nobody said anything dramatic. There was no speech. The music didn't stop. It was just a shift in the air, the way a room changes temperature without anyone opening a window. I stood there through it, and I felt very little of what I expected to feel. There was no satisfaction in the way I'd imagined there would be, back in the early years when I used to have those kinds of imaginations. There was something else, something I didn't have a name for until much later, something close to relief. Not because they finally knew, because I realized, standing there, that I had stopped needing them to know a long time ago. The work had never been about the moment they found out. The work had been about who I was becoming while they weren't watching. My sister found me again near the end of the evening. The speeches were done, and people were moving to the dance floor, and the particular looseness of a late-night reception had set in. She said, "I know this doesn't fix anything." I told her I didn't need it to fix anything. She said she'd been thinking since her husband told her about a lot of things, about what our parents had done and what she had allowed herself not to see. She said she wasn't sure she had earned the right to say she was sorry on their behalf, but that she was saying it anyway. I appreciated that. I told her so. She asked if we could talk. Not that night, but sometime. I said yes. Later, near the exit, my parents found me putting on my coat. My father spoke first. He said my name again, then paused for a long time. The way people pause when they've rehearsed something and discovered in the moment that it doesn't fit. He said, "I didn't know." I said, "I know you didn't. We should have been paying attention." I nodded. There wasn't much else to say to that. My mother took hold of my arm before I left. She didn't say anything at first. Then she said she thought about me more than I knew. She said she hoped I understood that. I told her I understood she believed that. I said goodnight. I walked out into the November cold, King Street quiet. At that hour, the hotel lit up behind me. I stood at the corner for a moment and I breathed in the cold air, and I felt the particular weight of a city that had gone on without knowing what had just happened inside one of its ballrooms. In the weeks after, my parents called. I answered sometimes. The conversations were careful and short, full of the specific awkwardness that comes when two people are trying to figure out what they owe each other and whether the debt is even payable anymore. I didn't make it easy. I didn't make it impossible either. My father asked once if I had ever been angry. I told him honestly that anger hadn't been the dominant thing. Clarity had been. The moment I stopped waiting for them to come around was the moment I started building something real. Anger would have kept me facing them. Clarity let me face forward. He didn't respond to that right away. I think he was working out what to do with it. My sister and I had coffee twice that winter. At a place on Queen West that she liked, all exposed brick and good espresso, and the low hum of a city that never quite settles. We talked carefully, the way adults talk when they're establishing something new rather than repairing something old. I preferred that frame. I wasn't interested in going back over the years like a damage assessment. I was interested in whether there was something worth building from where we currently were. I thought there might be. She asked me once what I wanted from our parents. I said I wanted what I'd always wanted, just not from them anymore. I'd found it elsewhere. In the work, in the people I'd built relationships with in Calgary, in the particular satisfaction of doing something difficult and doing it well, and knowing that the quality of the outcome belonged entirely to me. She nodded. She said, "I think they're starting to understand what they lost." I said, "Maybe," but I stopped keeping track of what they understand. It wasn't coldness. I want to be clear about that. It was something more precise than coldness. It was the recognition that some debts are real and some are constructed, and the ones your own parents built against you are in a category you can choose to walk away from. Not forgive in the easy sense, not pretend never happened, just walk away from. Stop carrying. The contract with my sister's company in Lakeshore closed formally in January. I recused myself from the final stages once the family connection became known to both sides. Professional ethics required it, and I was glad for the clean boundary. The deal proceeded without me and closed on good terms. I moved back to Toronto the following spring. Not because of any of this. Because the work had moved there and I was ready for the next thing. I found an apartment in the Junction, 2 bedrooms and good light, close enough to walk to a decent coffee shop, and far enough from my parents' house in Mississauga that proximity wasn't an obligation. I see them occasionally now. Sunday dinners, maybe once a month, carefully scheduled, with the particular formality of people who are being deliberate with each other. It is not the family I grew up imagining I would have, but it is, I think, an honest one. Honesty turned out to matter more to me than warmth in the end. Maybe because warmth was withheld for so long that I learned to do without it. Maybe because honesty was the only thing I ever had full control over, even when everything else was being decided for me. There's a moment I keep coming back to, from that November night at the Fairmont. Not the moment my parents saw me, not my sister walking across the room. It's a smaller moment right before any of that happened. I was standing near the back, alone, watching the room, and I felt completely calm. Not numb, not detached, calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly who you are, and not needing anyone in the room to confirm it. That calm was the thing I had been building toward for 15 years. Through every loan payment, every shift at the campus cafe, every late night in Calgary with nothing but a takeout container, and a set of financial documents for company. My parents had told me to learn independence. They meant it as an excuse. I took it as an instruction. I suppose, in the end, that was the one thing they gave me. They just didn't understand what they were giving.